Welcome to the Futurati podcast. Any member of the Futurati is somebody who believes in the power of the future. We know there's a better world ahead, and we indeed have the power to make it so. In our podcast, we talk to the best minds in the world about the most urgent problems facing mankind today, and we hope you learn as much from them as we do. I'm Thomas Fry, a professional futurist and keynote speaker.
And I'm Trent Fowler, a machine learning engineer and author. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Futurati podcast. Tonight, we're joined by Radhika Iyengar-Emens. Radhika is a founding partner at StarChain Ventures, a venture studio focused on the disruptive potential of blockchain technology in combination with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the Internet of Things, as well as a noted expert on applications of the blockchain. If you enjoy this interview, please don't forget to like the episode and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to check out our website, futuratipodcast.com. Radhika, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hi, nice to be with you both.
Let's hear a little bit about your background, your interests, and what brought you to working on the problems you're working on today.
Okay. So I'm an expert in advanced technologies, Web 3.0 technologies to be clear, blockchain, AI, IoT. By way of background, I've been in technology for many, many, many years. Been in Silicon Valley for many years as well, and seen enough of the arcs of technology and how they get developed and arcs of adoption, boom and bust cycles, you name it. I've been here to do that. But always, I think for me, what's always propelled me forward is the impact of technology. How do we leverage and harness the best of technology to deliver the systems of tomorrow? This is exactly what my focus is and what my life's journey, if you will, has really all been about. And as a, sector of focus, I am very passionate about healthcare. I am very determined to solve big problems in healthcare. So both in my venture studio endeavors as the company, as well as the company that I'm a CEO of, we are undertaking some pretty big problems on solving some foundational kinds of challenges in healthcare. By way of personal background, I can just say that I'm a global citizen. I was born in India. That is my cultural home and my home of heritage, if you will. But I grew up in North Africa, in Morocco, in fact, the northwesternmost tip of Africa. And so that particular vantage point being 14 kilometers away from the coast of Europe, very exposed to European cultures as well as in North African culture, as well as my homeland culture of India, it brings a unique mindset. And so that thinking global and crossroads and cross diffusion of cultures is very much embedded in my personal journey as well. So how does that all roll up into what I'm doing? For one thing, everything that I'm doing is global. I am all about solving global challenges. By leveraging technology. So it's really where all of those intersect is kind of how my life story has been woven.
So I got into a discussion this morning. I was talking about how many pills I take in the morning. And it seems like I'm taking about 10 pills in the morning and then another 3 or 4 before I go to bed. And I read about some people like Ray Kurzweil, who's taking 200 to 300 every day. And my sister-in-law, who actually takes, like 10,000. I don't know. It's like she travels with suitcases of pills. So I'm curious as to how do we actually come to grips with what's the optimal number of pills that we should be taking every day?
What kind of pills are you taking? Are they supplements or are they? This says some.
They're virtually all supplements, and so it gets to this point of how do we engineer the perfect human, I guess, and so I think we're all on that quest, and so everybody has this lingering question of am I doing the right thing?
Here's my short answer. My short answer is everyone's unique. So what's good for you is not exactly what's good for me or what's good for anyone else. And so I feel that answer is really at the heart of kind of what I'm on in terms of healthcare. Healthcare is still very much a one size fits all. And even your question to say, well, how much should anyone be taking? That depends on the person. That depends on what your needs are. And we're all individual. We're unique. And our DNA footprint is imprints are unique. Our requirements are unique. Our constitutions are unique. Our body constitutions, that is. How I react to something is very different from how somebody else reacts to it. So all of our needs are very dynamic and they're very unique to who we are as individuals. And yet, when you look at the face of healthcare, it's very much a one size fits all. And it's, for me, the quest of how do you deliver the best healthcare experience? Well, how do you deliver the best healthcare experience for that person is really where my thesis is at. And I do believe that the role of advanced technologies, whether it's digital health tools, whether it's more fundamental issues that I'm looking at, which is the entire conversation of data in healthcare, it really helps us contextualize a lot of what is not contextualized today. So I know that's kind of a longer answer to your simple question of how many pills should I be taking? The answer is it depends.
Right. So I've gone on this path of thinking about how do we hyper individualize healthcare, and this idea that we should be able to monitor whatever pills that we're taking. And a lot of the pills, they come in either 200 milligrams or 400 milligrams when the ideal dosage might be 137 milligrams or 368
Absolutely.
milligrams. So how is it that we can get to move down the path to like a 3D printed pharmaceutical solution where I can have this one pill that's 3D printed that has all of these pills in
Absolutely.
one, and they're all specifically to what I need that day.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, I think you raise a very good point. And actually, I've written articles on this where, the use of blockchain and AI and other tools, how do you bring that? And of course, 3D printers can deliver a much more personalized form of medicine that is really unique to the person receiving that. You can't just automatically 3D print something. Again, you asked a question, which is, what do I need today? So I think that, the more information that we have about us, right, and how it's all integrated together. So it's not the way it is today, which is a pocket of data here, a pocket of data over there. It's not stitched together. It's not interoperable. It's not shared with each other. Every person's data is kind of siloed, right? And so when we talk about, well, what is a person's data? We have this very patchwork quilt, not connected, by the way. It's almost like the squares of the patchwork quilt that exist and they're not even stitched together. So when we get to the point, and I think that Web 3.0 technologies and decentralized technologies have a great, powerful ability, which is it really liberates that data. Because first of all, the data belongs to us. And right now that isn't the case. It resides in N number of different providers, facilities, clinics, you name it, right? And then we've got some that is generated by us. Whether if you're using a fitness tracker or a monitoring tool of some sort, you have that bit of data too. So when you're stitching together all of that data and you know what the context is, even at a granular level, like you said, well, what do I need today? That has to be kind of the holy grail, where you see, well, what do I need today? Where are my deficiencies? Where are the gaps? What do I need today? And every day or every part of one day can be a changing, dynamic sort of situation. We're not static, right? We are dynamic and we change every moment of every day. So even when you go and take readings for something, you might be keeping a log sheet of some sort or sending your blood pressure monitor readings X times per day, depending on your need, to your doctor. All that data just means that it's aggregated. Then there's genomic data that is unique to us as well. How do we react to particular drugs, right? It's not a one size fits all in terms of drugs either. We all know that drugs are sort of generically developed but in terms of how they're developed, what clinical trial data is being utilized in that development of that drug, well, we all know that the average white middle-aged person is really the norm when it comes to the development and testing of drugs. I happen to be none of the above. And so how do we contextualize the data for a global population, a diverse population? So all of these are questions and challenges that are still being addressed. So before we get to that holy grail, which is what you painted, Tom, which is I'd like to have a 3D printed drug, as printed just for me today, that knows exactly the dosage that needs to be delivered today. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in order to arrive at that point when you can actually say, aha, here's the output of all of that analysis and inference, and you plug that into a 3D printer and out comes a drug that is customized for you for that day. So great aspirational goal. And I think that the technologies of today are there to, they actually exist. Are they available at scale? Not yet in terms of the 3D printing of drugs, but they are things that people are developing. So I think the technology very much exists, but all of the data and the contextual sort of information around who we are as individuals is far from it, right, in terms of readiness. So this is a very big challenge. And so for me, the conversation around the data perspective in healthcare, we are basically an aggregate total of data, if you will. Yeah. We're generating data all the time, every moment of every day, but it depends on where you are in that point in time and how do you harness all of that information in the right way at the right time with privacy, with trust, with security, with authenticity, because otherwise, the age-old saying, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have the right data that you're harnessing, you're still going to end up with the most sophisticated set of analysis on a given set of data. But if the set of data is incorrect or incomplete or inadequate, well, it's not going to do you much good. Yeah. So I think that, the conversation really starts at the beginning and the foundation. So that's the big challenge that I'm actually working on. But on the data story, I'm actually working on that trust, integrity, and privacy and security aspect of that equation, which is hugely important because right now what we have is just really egregious violations of security and privacy when it comes to our data. Ransomware attacks that are happening more and more and more. I mean, a third of global hospitals have been attacked already. So, this problem is not going away. So that I tend to be focused on that particular side of the equation. But I feel like when we can establish a trust layer or a true trust layer around data, that safeguards not only the security and privacy and integrity of that data, but the authenticity of that data, and begins to form a much more complete and comprehensive view into who we are as individuals. Now we can get to the more exciting things, which is what we really want to get to, which is how can I harness all of that power of that information about me so that I can have the things that are delivered to me in a customized fashion, right? And I'm not like you or anyone else, right? I am me. So that's kind of where, as far as I'm concerned, from a future perspective, this is sort of a life's endeavor for me. We can't do it in isolation. So, am I going to develop all of that? No, but I am going to develop a part of the solution, which I feel is at the very foundational level, so that I can then collaborate with other people working on other pieces of the puzzle, if you will. And it's this sort of ecosystem developments of solutions that can then lead us to this future point in time where, Tom, you can then 3D print a drug with the right dosage delivered to you at the right time of day for your needs at that point in time.
That's fantastic. I also am very interested in the application of technology to healthcare. I think it's a criminally broken system that needs a dramatic overhaul. It sounds to me like there are a couple of there's like a constellation of different issues you're discussing. One of them is piecing together the siloed data that currently exists and ensuring that you can trust it, that its integrity is maintained, and that trust is established probably through the blockchain and without a third-party intermediary, if I had to guess. But there's also another question of actually gathering additional data. So some of the things we've been talking about are genomics data, there's proteomics data, there's connectomics data. There's really a lot.
All the omics.
Yeah,
all the omics.
All the omics, right? And presumably
all the omics, microbiome included.
Yeah. I left that out of my list. I was thinking of that as well. And that, as far as I know, would also require the development of new sensors and whole new technologies and ways of analyzing those things in real time. If you're going to be timing doses down to the quarter hour or something like that, then you're going to have these real-time systems that are always gathering these data. And we interviewed Gary Wolf from the Quantified Self Project a while back, and he discussed some of the issues with that. It actually turns out to be really hard to do. So I guess from that welter, you've chosen to work on one aspect of it. Do you think that's just the lowest hanging fruit? Do you think it's the biggest problem? How do you feel about these other issues?
I think it's one of the biggest problems, right? Okay. I mean, I always, when I've thought about this, and I've thought about it a lot, and I've spoken about it a lot, I've addressed conferences on this particular subject. We tend to start at that finish line, right? We'd all like to be at that finish line, so we kind of think, aspirationally about what that looks at the finish line and say, gosh, I'd like to be at the point where I can press the button and print the thing for myself, right? And so that's kind of the aspirational goal. But like I said, there's a lot that leads up to that point. And what I feel is fundamentally broken in today's systems is really the entire data story is broken. It's very fragmented, it's siloed, it's insecure, meaning it's very poor security protocols around it, poor privacy and consent protocols around it. Authenticity is a big problem. People fake things all the time. So there's a lot of issues, of multidimensional sort of issues around what data is. And so, the cornerstone for our success will depend on the integrity and privacy and security and authenticity of that data. And this is where today's systems are failing us. So for me, that's the starting point. I look at, we'd love to put the Band-Aid on something that exists, but if the foundation is broken, or as I say, Band-Aid solutions to deep tissue problems don't work. You've got to be able to restitch that tissue underneath it all for you to then put the Band-Aid on top, and now the whole system has a chance to heal. So for me, the way, and I'm using a very deliberately a healthcare analogy, you talk to any doctor, any surgeon, let's say you've got a deep gash or something, there's no way you can put a little Band-Aid on it and it's going to heal itself. You need some help. It needs stitching and suturing at the right levels of tissue for it to be able to start to heal completely. So I think that's where we're at. And when I look at the problem, I look at the foundation that is it's broken. And so for me, the fixing the data problem starts at the very, very bottom, at the very heart of everything. And so the company that I'm a CEO of, which is Barley Corporation, is a trust platform around data, so that any data, whether it's data in motion or data at rest, is secured, it's private, it's authentic, and it's also authenticated. So we've got the right identity mechanisms attached to this, and it's all based on Web 3.0 technologies, so that now we can start to build the trust around that entire data continuum, no matter who the stakeholder is that is sending or receiving data, right? And obviously the data is not, we're recording is the transactions and records of that data. We don't have the data. The data is private. It belongs to the person that it belongs to, i.e. us. So what we're recording is the transactions on that data. And when you can see and you have this complete transparency and visibility across the entire data continuum, and you can see exactly what's happening, now it's very powerful, because you can secure all of that movement, and that the data has, you haven't lost any of the integrity of that data. So to me, that is a foundational problem. Now, how does it impact the future of healthcare? Well, once you start having a complete set of data available to a person, that's a game changer, because it doesn't exist today. If any of us were asked, well, do you have a complete record of yourself? No. I mean, and if you're a typical person, and, I don't know what your personal backgrounds are, but I was born in one place, raised in another, and moved around several places before I found myself in Silicon Valley. But there's a piece of me in every one of those places, right? And so, and maybe that piece of me now no longer exists because there's a statute of limitations in terms of how long they're going to keep that data. Oh, this is an age-old file, I'm going to throw that, right? They just threw away a piece of me. I don't really even have access to that piece of me that existed from eons ago, right? And so when we start thinking about what it is to have a complete holistic record of who we are from a data perspective, that's, I think, the holy grail. So but you have to start at the very, very bottom, which is, how do you secure the data itself? How do you make sure that it's, that its integrity is protected, its privacy is protected, and the trust is safeguarded around that set of data, if you will, that is ours, right? So does that answer your question, just in terms of where I'm beginning and why I'm beginning there? Because for me, that's like the lowest layer then, and it is the most important layer, I feel, before you can even get to the next layers.
Yeah, no, that is excellent information. So it sounds like, you believe that there is enough data existent currently for us to get a pretty good start on this problem, but it's everywhere, right? And nobody has access to it. Ownership isn't really clear. There's not even really a concept of ownership applied to data before a couple of years back. I am very curious about the technology that you're using to solve these problems. You've made several references to Web3. That's honestly something I don't know that much about. I assume it involves blockchain because I read a bunch of your articles. So tell me as much as you can of the non-proprietary information about your tech stack and how you're solving that problem.
Well, I mean, it is blockchain, and
Right.
it is, we have various elements. I don't know how deeply I can delve into it because it is proprietary. So, we're not going to be able to dive into the weeds on that, so to speak, because it is very much a proprietary way. I often describe it as, it's the way we're putting those Lego blocks together, and the architecting the design of this that is really giving us that compelling advantage. But I'll tell you the attributes that we are delivering, which I'll just say that the Web 2.0 solutions that exist out there are aspirationally claiming to have, but really that's the goal, but they're not truly able to deliver. So there's three things I can tell you. One is that it's zero trust architecture, which just means that, exactly as it sounds, we don't trust anybody. You have everything, every action has to be authenticated by the right people in order for that action to be allowed or permitted, right? And so we don't take anybody's credentials as, oh, okay, well, you say who you are. Prove to me who you are, right? And so there are methods used based on their Web 3.0 blockchain methods that are, proving out who that person is. And then past that point, the consent mechanisms that are in place, for example, are also based on blockchain. So we've got to be able to authenticate and verify everything that happens before that can move forward. I will say also that because we have every single transaction of every record visible to us, we know the exact trail of records and transactions, the trail of transactions on every record available at any given time, fully transparent, fully traceable, fully auditable, right? And so from many different perspectives, this again is something that is very powerful, because at any given time, if you say, well, who had access to my record? Right now, if you say, if your doctor shared your record with any other person, right now you sign a generic HIPAA compliant sort of document that says, sure, if you need to consult with somebody in my treatment, I give you authorization to do that. Do you know when they've done it, how they've done it, who's had access, who's looked at it? You have no knowledge. You're giving them a blanket consent, basically. So, in the future, each one of those actions is going to be carefully evaluated. It's not to say that we have to go and stop our life every moment and to be this pop-up thing that comes up on your phone or something and says, oh, well, you have to do this. You can say, oh, for any action that Dr. ABC does, I fully authorize them to do it at any time. That's a blanket consent, but it is your prerogative to issue that. Or you can say, well, I'm going to give Dr. ABC time at a more granular level, maybe just for today, maybe allow it only once, maybe for the next month, whatever, or you change doctors. There's no reason for a previous doctor, a GP, for example, to continue to have full access to your record if they're no longer treating you. So all of these things are blockchain-based systems that can be established to safeguard the privacy of our data and the access to our data. And all of this granular access to our data is incredibly important when you're safeguarding the security of what we have as our record, right? So that's the second element. So we can basically see everything that's happening, and that's kind of like immutable logging is what we call it, right? We're logging every single record of every transaction so that anybody can audit and trace this and look at it at any given time, right? And then the last thing is when you see all of the transactions on every record that's happening, you can then start to detect anomalous behavior based on AI mechanisms and so on, and say, oh, wow, that's not an action that's typical for this particular record. Why is that, right? And you can bubble it up, and there's alerts that can come up and say, and it's not just having an alert. We have a multi-party consensus mechanism built into the system so that depending on how sensitive the nature of this request is, there has to be given at any given time, multi-parties consenting to that being done. Think of, so I'm going to throw another example at you, and it's not healthcare, but think about what recently happened to Twitch. Did you hear what happened to Twitch?
No.
So there was a person, an employee who had, I think, super admin access at the time. A couple of years ago, the employment was terminated, and lo and behold, his admin rights were not revoked at that time. So then what happened just recently is he was able to, and I don't know how long he'd been doing this, he basically took all of the source code for Twitch, including all strategic roadmaps and everything around their development, and put it all out onto the dark web.
Ooh.
So you've got some pretty egregious behavior that is going on. And what we want to do is, depending on the magnitude of an action in terms of records and so on, we're just not going to allow super users, and we don't have any super users. So we're not going to allow just anybody willy-nilly to come in and do certain things, right? It's all going to be based on consensus. It's kind of like the equivalent of, a president having that red box saying, okay, well, in order to activate certain controls that are very, very highly sensitive kind of actions, there's going to be multiple parties that need to consent and have to have the right codes in order to be able to do that function at that time, right? So here's the same idea, is that depending on what action you're talking about, we're going to have this multi-party consensus mechanism. So you can see that all of these, these mechanisms result in a trust framework around data, so that anything that is happening to the data is transparent and visible in terms of the record of the transactions, not the data itself, but the records of the transactions. And then B, that all of this activity is done in a secure, ultra secure environment, so that, the kinds of egregious behavior and, insidious types of attacks that are happening today can actually be averted, right? Successfully averted. So I think that, why would I be so passionate about this when it comes to the delivery of healthcare? So here, let me give you a healthcare ransomware sort of picture. May 1st of this year, Scripps Health, which is a hospital system in San Diego for hospitals, suffered a ransomware attack. They were offline for 4 weeks. Just offline, completely offline for 4 weeks. They lost 150,000 patient records. They suffered nearly $113 million of lost revenue because, again, offline. Right. They have several class action lawsuits from patients who have claimed identity and privacy violations. They have regulatory bodies that are looking at them saying, you violated all of these compliance issues, right? So you've got the magnitude of the problem is enormous. And when you think about a third of global hospitals that have suffered these ransomware attacks, you know that the problem is just worldwide, enormous, right? And so when we think about delivery of healthcare, what we need to be safeguarding is the continuity of healthcare itself. If our doctors and our providers go offline, that's going to be of no use to us. We need access to services when we need access to services with the person we need access to. So all of these, again, these are not, each one of these things is a big problem to solve. So any one entity is not going to say, I'm going to go boil the ocean to solve all of this, right? We have to function as a big ecosystem of problem solvers to be able to come together and say, let's, form the right partnerships with the right people so that we've got now a system that is then being developed, and each one of us is contributing to a critical piece of the puzzle, if you will.
So this is you're very good at stating the problem and the solution that you'd like to provide. Can you talk a little bit about how you're planning on implementing this? I mean, which layer of the overall healthcare puzzle are you going to strategically go after first?
It's the security aspect. I mean, I'm very, very, very much focused on that security layer because, we can't ignore these ransomware attacks anymore. I mean, ransomware as a whole has become such a huge problem. First of all, in healthcare, it's twice as big a problem in healthcare than any other sector. And second of all, it's now the 11th consecutive year that we've had healthcare being the number one sector of attack. And I use that as a pun on words, because this is going to be, if you're going to pick any one sector, you're going to pick healthcare. You're going to you think about how to solve this problem for healthcare. So that's where what we're focused on is, where do we fit in the stack? We're actually the trust backbone of data, if you will. So we see all of the interactions of data in any one given system, if you will. To me, I do want to tell you that as far as the data problems are concerned, all of that information is public. What I am talking to you about in terms of architecture and so on, all of that information, the basic information that I've shared with you about our system is also public. That's on our website, actually. But I would say that in terms of the mechanisms and the know-how and all of that, that's proprietary. So I'm not going to be able to comment on that today.
No, that's perfectly fine. I am 100% with you on the ransomware issue. So I actually work at a company called Elementus. I don't know if I'm wearing the shirt.
I see that.
Yeah. So we are building a search engine, a universal search engine for blockchain data. And one of the main things we're working on is finding these bad actors who are engaging these ransomware attacks, and then figuring out all the different addresses that are interoperating with the actors, and then helping law enforcement or interested parties to track them down. So yeah, it's a huge issue, and I'm really glad to know that you are working on it. I'm not really clear.
Slightly different area that you're working on, but very similar, sort of in the sense of multi-party and so on.
Oh yeah, and we read a lot about the targets against the healthcare sector specifically. That's one of the motivating use cases for trying to track these people down. And I'm curious about the Web 3.0 angle. So I understand the blockchain, I think, at a relatively high level, but I'm not sure what Web 3.0 is and how that's different, if it is different at all.
Well, first of all, I think Web 3.0 in general is a range of different technologies. It also includes things like artificial intelligence, for example, right? It's a range of technologies, but I would say many consider Web 2.0 to be the social web, if you will, right? All of the information being shared across social channels. And it's very much underpinned by the internet and TCP/IP, which is a communication protocol. Packets of information being sent, received. That's really what TCP/IP was designed for and what internet was designed for. It was never really designed with privacy and security in mind.
Right.
So when we talk about Web 3.0, we're talking about decentralization. We're talking about blockchain. We're talking about combination of the combination of blockchain and other advanced technologies as well, which is a whole new range of conversation. Many also think that And if you think about the difference between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0, one is centralized, the other one is decentralized, right? So that's a very critical difference. The other difference too, many people talk about Web 3.0 as being a semantic web as well. So there's other elements of the web that do come up in that conversation on Web 3.0. But what I'm actually referring to is the fact that it's decentralized, the fact that it is a combination of multiple technologies like blockchain or AI, for example, and others, right? And so it's really when you have the convergence of multiple advanced technologies, because again, each one plays a role in solving a particular aspect of the puzzle, the aggregate is really what that transformational power comes from.
Right. I realize this isn't the thing that you're focused on solving right now, but I'm curious as to whether or not you have thoughts about building applications for data mining or customer segmentation or predictive analytics on top of a system like the one that you have now. Like you're focused on the trust, but there's a lot of information in those records. Like you're tracking the transactions, who has access to them, so that you have more data sovereignty. But what do you think about the potential of liberating data from those silos, building graphs out of it, doing analytics on that?
Absolutely. I mean, we're going to have to do that ourselves, just because, just from a cybersecurity perspective, if we're going to detect anomalous behavior, we're going to have to detect what is normal, what is not, we're going to have to identify that very quickly in real time, right? And what other people say is real time is not necessarily real time, because once they get behind the firewall of something, it's a game over. I mean, they're just behind already. So the burglar's already in your house, so to speak. So what we're concentrated, and to your point, there are other things that can be built on top of this. This is sort of that foundational backbone layer, right? And we're starting there because we feel like that's where the problems are greatest and where the threats are greatest. And so we want to minimize all of the threats as much as possible. And if our clients are going to, choose the entire solution, which is, more Web 3.0, i.e. decentralized, then you're going to really feel the full benefits of protection from that. So I want to mention that all of that information is basically public, right? It's the fact that, this is based on Web 3.0 technologies. Now, how can this be used in other ways? There's a lot of different things that can come out of this. To that point, I mean, healthcare is, I think, our beachhead sector. That's the area that we feel the problem is greatest, and one where we feel our solution is most differentiated and compelling. But there are certainly other applications that I can totally see happening in other sectors. And that's where partnering with other folks and so on and developing these more comprehensive solutions can be very, very beneficial.
So in suggesting a solution for all these problems, obviously the people that have been doing this for years and years, there's certain resistance to change. So where are you finding the biggest problem areas, the biggest kind of entrenchment that has been taking place that prevents? It would seem to me that everybody should just celebrate and embrace your technology and run with it. But what are you running into?
Well, I would say that where challenges are, opportunity lies. And so if this problem is so big, Tom, that to do nothing is worse than doing even the teeniest bit of something, right? So what we're looking at, when we look at our system, we're not asking somebody to rip and replace, right? We're asking an entity to say, this is your on-ramp towards this complete digital transformation journey into Web 3.0 based technologies, right? i.e. decentralized and blockchain, et cetera, right? And so we realize that investments currently are made with cloud providers or other entities that they already have things on board. And while employing those may not be the ideal whole solution, basically the fullest vision of the solution, we recognize that that is a reality. And yet what we say is, even with that, there's going to be measurable improvement in what they're going to be able to do as far as data protection today, right? And so as they start migrating through this transformation journey with us and say, okay, now I'm ready to embrace more, right? The first step is to say, well, can you afford to be in status quo? And the answer is no.
Right.
Because in the US alone, 93% of hospitals have been breached. That's a staggering figure. So chances are that if you're not already breached, you soon will be. You can't afford to do nothing. So, we're already underway with a pilot at a small oncology clinic. And the reason why they came to us was because of ransomware attack. So no clinic, no facility, small or large, is safe. And so the status quo just simply is untenable. So if you look at where we are in that solution, what we're saying is, let us be the trust on-ramp, if you will, to a much safer data platform for you, right, as a customer. And I think that most of the conversations now that we're having with, let's say CISOs of hospitals and so on, are really quite frank, admitting to us that they don't have the degree of visibility by any means into what they have as a data lake, for example. They just don't have the visibility. Mm-hmm. They don't really understand what's happening to their own data in particular areas. So there's ways that we can partner with them immediately to test it out and to say, let's build trust and confidence in terms of our interaction and our system. And so I think that just like with anything else, Tom, we're going to have to go one step at a time. We're going to have to crawl before we walk and walk before we run. So the crawling step might be a small pilot to say, let's test it out in one little data lake that you might have for XYZ purpose, right? And so let's start there and let's prove out. And if we can prove to you that we have complete transparency and auditability and traceability of all the data, now you can see exactly what's going on, when it's going on, et cetera. And you can take actions and measures because of that. That's a big confidence booster. And I think that it's about leading our clients and our customers along this digital transformation Web 3.0 journey, saying this is an on-ramp, that we are a conduit in order to be able to achieve full digital transformation. Full digital transformation can be in different phases. For a small clinic, it might be like, well, we have to first help you digitize stuff first, because so much of it is still in paper and fax right. and whatnot, right? So there's a journey that we have to go on, and we're fully prepared and committed to going on that journey with our clients, because we understand that the minute we start taking them on this journey, there will be more aha moments going off in their head saying, oh my God, I didn't realize I could already do this. Oh, I didn't realize I could have control over this. I didn't realize that this could be something that I have full visibility over. This is not something I understood before. So all of these aha moments, I think, are going to contribute to a greater conversation around how we can then collaborate on the next phase in their digital transformation journey. So that the end result of all of that will be this complete transformation into a Web 3.0 based technology system that is much more impervious to current threats and attacks. It just doesn't exist today, right? They're, like I said, Band-Aid solutions to deep tissue right. problems. There's a lot that's out there, but the approach is fundamentally wrong in our opinion. And so we're very much centered around a new approach, designing, I think, much more resilient systems for the future.
I love that you are trying to tackle this enormous problem, because I agree that it's really something that needs to be addressed. But one of the things we're interested in the podcast are just general use cases for the blockchain. And I know you've given a lot of thought to that. So to broaden our perspective a bit, what are some other areas where you think the blockchain approach would be particularly fruitful? And you've alluded several times to making partnerships with other entities, maybe outside of healthcare. What's your thinking along those lines?
In terms of healthcare or beyond healthcare, or
beyond healthcare? Yeah.
Wow, there's so many different use cases. I'll refer you to my book, and I know this is on video, but this is for you. This is my book.
Yeah.
Enterprise Blockchain Has Arrived.
Right.
And that book is, I think, the most comprehensive book that exists today on the topic in terms of not just what this technology is all about, but the use cases, applications, and implications of this technology. We've got great use cases for blockchain, not only in healthcare, as I've been talking about, and life sciences, by the way, the drug and pharma, supply chains and development. But we also have great use cases in financial services and banking. That aspect has been even more, I think, in the news, if you will. Payment rails, crypto's a part of that conversation. Then there's also, supply chain logistics, as I mentioned. Pharma is one aspect of it, power and energy. There's a whole host of different use cases. I'd say there's about, 24 of them at least that I can think of that, just in terms of applications of this technology. I think we'd be here all day if we had to discuss all of them. But, I think I would encourage readers to check out the book because it really is organized in a way where you can look and deep dive into any of the sectors and understand what the current opportunities are and then what the future opportunities are and how this is going to be a matter of, this is an adoption curve of technology as well that is continually and dynamically evolving. How do we partner with other people? Well, we're doing the trust backbone. So if there are other people that are developing other point solutions and such that then plug into that, that's then developing an ecosystem around our trust backbone, right? And what we envision, the entire conversation of data, which is kind of where we began this conversation, is about a multi-stakeholder model, right? If you look at even healthcare or even financial services, there's multiple stakeholders to the data. So any of those stakeholders that want to do anything meaningful with that data, those are the people at the table. And so people are working on different kinds of solutions that address different parts of the problem. Some people are working on only the consumer part of the problem, right? And others, like us, on the enterprise side. So, a lot of the systems of tomorrow, as I can tell, are going to be kind of these, it's going to be both the permissionless and permission side of blockchain. It's all, in my view, all of these systems ought to be decentralized systems because just the centralized models of Web 2.0 are just broken. They're foundationally flawed. And so we are going through that process of transformation. In every sector that you can imagine, there's a beautiful graphic that I wish I could show you from Forbes 50, if you will. There's just the biggest names in the business in every sector you could possibly think about are looking at this technology, are doing something with this technology, are experimenting with this technology, and or evaluating this technology in general, each in a different sort of stage, if you will, of adoption. But I think clearly the bullishness that people are feeling around this technology is there for good reason, because again, it's about, do you stay with status quo, which is failing us, right, truly failing us, or do you start to look at what avenues are here before us that is much better at addressing the kinds of problems we have today that we currently can't address with current systems? So I think that this openness to any of the technologists and the futurists of the world, it's not just about having painting a picture for the future, it's how do we get there? So I think, painting the picture is just as important as designing the system that's going to help us get there. In fact, helping us designing the system that's going to help us get there is probably the more important aspect, because as you know, everything is in execution, right? It's great to have a vision of what there is to come, but if you can't deliver on it, and if you can't build the system that's going to deliver it, then you keep staying in vision land, and you're not able to deploy something and implement something for reality. So I think that's kind of the excitement that I have, and that my colleagues have in terms of building the systems of tomorrow intelligently and more have it be more resilient. In the ways that we want it to be more resilient. So the book was written with that mindset. It was written with that thesis in mind. It was also written to democratize access to information, because a lot of the information we've written about are things you would find in, very expensive reports from very big think tanks or big four kind of players. And we just feel like the power of information lies in being able to share that with a broader segment of the population. Anybody from any walk of life can pick up the book and can understand what this technology really truly is and can embrace it and see the future that can be built with it. So this was another idea of writing the book. And then our endeavors in terms of the venture studio that we have, which is StarChain Ventures, it's really focused on not only building companies that have this vision for delivering a better tomorrow, but also guiding other companies on this journey and making sure that what we're doing for tomorrow is something that is much more tenable than what we have today.
So very, very obviously, this is a global problem. This is not just a U.S.-centric problem. Are there parts of the world that are doing it right or getting close to?
Parts of it, I would say. I see, different ecosystems. I think Europe is, from a regulatory perspective, I feel like they're much more on a more positive path. If you talk to people from over there, they'll still say we're not there yet. Grass is always greener on the other side, kind of a thing. But I think that they're very much aware that this is going to be part of the solution. So I think I do see a degree of acceptance there that I feel is stronger than what we have here, just from a mainstream perspective. And then I think from a regulatory perspective, they're actually looking at this and saying, how can we employ this technology to deliver good? That being said, what I'm really encouraged by here in California, for example, the fact that we had or have this blockchain working group for the state of California is enormously impactful, because it shows that California is a forward-looking state. It always has been, it always will be. And so from a state perspective, we're also helping to lead the way in terms of, how do we harness the power of this technology to deliver better services for 40 million people that reside in this state. And we are kind of like a small country at that point. So I think that this test bed offers also a unique partnership between public sector and private sector to say, how can we come together to deliver better societal systems, better ways of delivering services from the state of California towards this 40 million residents. So all of these things that we had to ponder as a group and come up with use cases, as well as proposed solutions and pilots that the state of California could start looking at. Of course, we released that July of last year. So that was during the time of the pandemic, and we're still kind of during that time. So at some point we will get to phase 2, but it's just a marker for us to say that there is a certain degree of optimism, I think, in both local and hyper local, if you will, from a California state perspective, as well as global. I think the Middle East has done a lot more experimentation. United Arab Emirates, for example, really embracing the power of blockchain to rethink government systems, healthcare systems, voting systems, all manner of different systems that are all strung together. You have the country of Estonia that has also done the same sort of thing, rethinking kind of their digital mechanisms on things. Some of it's already kind of old, and so they're kind of have to catch up to the times as well. But I think that these are very encouraging markers and indicators of what's to come. Clearly, from a global perspective, we're all kind of having to solve similar problems in different ways. But I think the power of technology can be really leveraged for a greater good, if I will. And so from that standpoint, I'm also very encouraged to see the potential of this technology to deliver social good on a scale that has been unprecedented. I participated recently in a digital consultation with the UN Secretary General. And so the mission of that was many thought leaders globally presenting different proposals to the UNSG about ways to harness this technology to deliver better systems that are more inclusive or fairer or more equitable. And so some of the proposals that I passionately advocated and presented were on those levels. So I think there is great power for this technology to deliver what I feel is a better system for tomorrow, one that is fairer, one that is more equitable, one that is more inclusive. And to me, I think very deeply about systems that are currently failing us today and saying, how can technology be leveraged in a more intelligent, truly more intelligent fashion to be for the benefit of all, not for the benefit of the few. These disparities exist in every corner of the globe, in every dimension, in every sector. You're talking financial equity, healthcare equity, power and energy equity, just access in general to things that we should all have access to as human beings. So I think that this is, when you think about life systems on Earth, there's a huge, compelling call to all of us. We can't do it alone, but we can do it if we all start thinking about our ecosystem as a global ecosystem, as a global community. And this is also another aspect that draws me towards blockchain, because the very ethos of blockchain is about community. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not about I can win and only if you lose, or I can prevail if you fail. So this is about what can I develop linking arms with you, right? And what can we develop together that is much stronger than what either you or I could do individually? So I think that this is kind of the stage where we're at, and I feel like global systems are really in peril right now. COP26 is going on. There's so much conversation around why are we here for the 26th gathering and we're still talking about the same failings and are unable to muster the degree of community power and political will to deliver for the benefit of the whole planet. You're talking about global systems that are absolutely at peril. So I think that technologies of today have a great deal of promise if we can harness them for the power of everyone, not for the power of the few.
Well, we normally like to wrap up on a positive note, and I think that was very admirably done on your part. Thanks so much for joining us. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is terrific. Yeah, thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.